Welcome back. You're watching the program Into the Discussion, and we are at the round table with Benji Ndolo, senior political commentator. Good morning, Benji. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, my brother.
Bao.
Oh,
2020.
So much life.
Kenyans
yeah?
are so creative.
Where I come from, because I was in the village, they're calling it 2020.
2020.
Mount Linda.
That's right. I know, right?
Bushire.
2020.
Bushire. Yeah, 2020.
It's very
And
unique.
combining it with whatever it is that he's saying.
It's the first Monday of the first month of the first year of the decade.
And
But you're getting us confused.
And no traffic in Nairobi.
Apparently.
Very happy.
And we're anticipating a lot of traffic
It's not
today.
going to be the
Now that
case.
schools
Just
will be
enjoy
reopening.
for today.
At the center is Morocco Bishage, a political commentator, analyst on developments in the country. Mike Oleo is my own immediate right, and he is public policy expert. And I do thank you, gentlemen, for coming this Monday morning.
Today is heavy.
And of course, there is a lot to discuss, and our starting point, of course, pertains what is equally highlighted on the front page of the Daily Nation. That is the main headline. Mato, our director, can we have that up on air?
This is not it.
And this is what the Daily Nation does say, and it all pertains to national security, a continuation of what yesterday developed in Lamu County, how Al-Shabaab militants plotted raid on a military camp. Details the paper does cover on the next page, and it does pertain the pattern of how the attack did happen in early morning. That was about 4 a.m. The Kenya Defense Forces did say in a statement that was issued yesterday that it successfully did repulse the attack by the militants that crossed over from the neighboring Somalia. Again, poses the question as to how the security agencies are likely going to be learning from this with regards to how it's laying the lessons in terms of heightening security. And we witnessed, of course, beefed up security in the central business district as of yesterday here in the capital, Nairobi. Coming to you first, Benji, when you look at the happenstances ever since 2011, when we deployed boots in Somalia as part of the country's security in the Operation Linda Inchi, there were, of course, subsequent attacks by the militants. Of course, main cases, the macro ones, Westgate, the Dusit D2 hotel attack. And will you perhaps read a sense of the tension that continues to spill over from the Middle Eastern part of the world, noting how America and Iran are conflicting on the interests that are playing out and that might likely impact the security of the Horn of Africa region?
Thank you so much, my brother. And once again, Happy New Year to everyone, to all our viewers. We're really hoping for a good year going forward, even though it's been a really difficult year in 2019. And predictions, as highlighted by CBK Governor,
it's going to be tough.
It's going to be tough. And so we will also, especially on this show, be calling for greater accountability of leadership to create opportunity, because we cannot just, as Kenyans now, live in a country where it's just about survival year in, year out, no growth, no movement, just issues around the basic things about food, around unemployment, and now, as pertains to your question, even security. Because the reality now is that Al-Shabaab is a problem. We must be on high alert, always. We must be vigilant. We must be at the ready. And this does not apply only to National Police Service, but to the common and ordinary citizens, as well as including just regular security guards, including here and elsewhere. The whole thing of scanning, checking, profiling is very, 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 very important. And so, as you mentioned, Ayub, since 2011, we've been in Somalia, and I've been on the record. We should not, in any way, Kenya, be seen as an occupier force. And so we should have done a quick incursion and then gotten out of Somalia and deployed our military, redeployed to the border to secure Kenya. But we should not continue to be seen to occupy Somalia, to be doing funny things in Somalia, for example, trading in charcoal and whatever all these allegations and reports, credible reports have been compiled by international bodies around that. And it's particularly now with the conflict between Iran and the US. I was just telling Mike off air before we came on set, today's plate is really so complex and full, so I actually had to do some preparations myself, which I usually don't have to. But this is a very sticky and dangerous conflict. If you followed my tweets the last 48 hours, it's very clear Donald Trump is ready for anything and everything. And so it would be ill-advised to make any quick and false move. There need to be restraint on both sides. This is a very serious issue. And one of the only ways to retaliate against a lion like the US is not so much in conventional warfare, because you cannot face them head on and you cannot enter their country. So then usually you use, these nefarious channels, bombings of
assassinations,
targeting innocent civilians, mass collateral damage, and what have you, just send a message. And so the threat and the scourge of Al-Shabaab is real, and it will be more real now going forward, and especially in 2020. So one of our key priorities, and I'll be looking for people like the IG to just caucus a little bit around this issue, will be to be ever vigilant, ever alert, to feed information on anything suspicious that you see at major installations, airports, refineries, depots, any gatherings where you have lots of people congregated, churches, synagogues, etc., so that we guarantee the safety and security of Kenyans and also of our partners, allies, Americans, Italians, British, that are on Kenyan soil living and working.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
Bichage, picking up from what Ayub has asked and also what Benji has brought on board in regards to that connection, or maybe that allegation that there could be a connection of what played out, of course, or what is playing out in the US and Iran, of course, coming down to the attack that was witnessed in Lamu, better say, Camp Simba. How accurate can we be to connect these? Much as we know very well that, of course, this was staged at a place where we have U.S. military, and looking at the fact that it would take some while, proper timing or proper preparation to stage such an attack, and equally, just knowing very well that for the longest of time we've had such attacks, mated upon, of course, the people of Lamu. I mean, would it really be accurate for us to connect the two?
Thank you, Linda, and Happy New Year. For me, January is a special month because yesterday I turned a year older.
Happy birthday.
Yeah, so I'm old enough.
Happy birthday.
Yeah, so coming back to your question, I think it is important we look at security from a global perspective, because now security is indeed a concern, as Benji said. When you look at the global challenges, the challenges that most countries are facing, security is a key component of it. And if you connect what happened in Iran and Kenya, I think there is a connection, because you see...
Within that short span, because of course the creme de la creme, or better yet, the pivotal bit of it was of course upon the assassinating of Qasim. And within that time, of course, then again, the attacks in Lamu. I mean, don't you think it's such a short span for that to be reactionary in regards to what played out between the two countries?
Well, it might be a short span, but remember Al-Shabaab has, their main job is to attack, is to...
So they're always on standby.
So they're always on standby.
Okay.
And I think, most importantly, they wanted to communicate that we are around. Either way. And when you look at both Iran and the US, our relationship with the US is much, we are a friend to the US. And Iran ideally would target, would not target US because the military formation of the US is quite stronger. So Iran would therefore tend to target, the close allies of the US. And when you look at what happened in Lamu, I only had a problem with the communication part of it, because well, nothing really happened. The international community was communicating something else. Our local communication agency was also communicating something else and saying it was an attempt. So for me, as much as it was a short span, they were just communicating presence, that we are around and be prepared for retaliatory attacks.
In that case, you suppose that would have been tactical. Michael Leo, looking at the fact that, of course, they sent in, Ayub, allow me to ask this, they sent in such a small number to attack a military base, and that might have been tactical to sort of send a message, or maybe a propaganda message that would actually sold pretty much well, because you realize also there was not so much so that was done towards damaging, the activities within the military base.
Thank you, Linda. And Happy New Year, everybody.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, bro.
3 things. One, I think the Lamu attack was a message Al-Shabaab wanted to send a message to America to prove American vulnerability around the world. America has very many interests, and Al-Shabaab wanted to prove that they can reach any time that they want. Two, the second thing is terrorism is a borderless and global problem, and it needs a global solution. It is not a simple thing between two countries. It's not even about America and Iran. Those are just two players in the game. The world needs a global solution to this problem because it's a global problem. Three, the era of conventional armies engaged in physical combat is basically coming to an end. The only interesting bit is that Al-Shabaab is still very much interested in physical combat. Like yesterday, the attack was very physical. They penetrated the camp and set things on fire and shot. They actually killed 3 people. Those are 3 things that are very unique about the attack yesterday. Now, let's talk about it from the American perspective. When Donald Trump ordered for the assassination of Qasem Soleimani, it meant 2 things to me. One, to delay the impeachment proceedings that are about to happen. You know how you marshal sympathy from across the divide. And 2, America is heading towards a general election in this year.
November.
And America is usually very, Americans by nature are very interested about in matters to do with foreign policy. They are very keen. On matters foreign policy, they are very keen and pay a lot of attention. So it's also important to look at it from the American perspective, that whatever is happening now is related to the internal politics of the USA.
Okay, Benji, I'll come to you, and 2 quick questions here with regards to the accountability front here. And I just was this morning reading a tweet from the U.S. Senate Foreign Relations Committee in the United States of America, and it said, the person who chairs the committee said, "I'm saddened to learn that Americans and Kenyan lives were lost during the heinous terrorist attack on the Kenya-U.S. base early yesterday morning. The U.S.-Kenya partnership remains strong in the fight against Al-Shabaab and global terrorism." We never heard a statement from the Kenya Defense Forces with regards to the casualties that were caused, but statement in how they repulsed the attack. Number 2, is it perhaps one that may throw lessons the way of the security agencies in the country in terms of learning what has happened in the past, and from that ensure that you come up with measures to ensure you foil attacks that might target soft civilian gathering points, especially places of worship and public gatherings?
That goes without saying, Ayub. We have to improve our tactics. We have to improve our response. I saw a tweet by the IG yesterday asking anyone that sees anything or any suspicious activity or attack to utilize 999, a response emergency number which was not working until the other day when we raised the issue. I remember specifically raising the issue, and my colleague Okia Mtata moving to court to have that response number activated, as well as number 112. So that the response, the equipping, the tactics. I saw some patrols yesterday that unfortunately make it look a bit like a police state, but they're quite necessary. If you remember also I did some work around security some years back. We had an attack one time, I think it was in Kapedo, where officers were killed on patrol. And if you look at the design information, without going into specifics, they would get into a pickup truck and then they face each other, what you call 6-a-side. But in truth, what needed to do is that needed to be inverted the other way, so that they're sitting with their backs to each other and their weapons pointed outwards. Now, these are small, minor details, because sometimes you face each other, then you can't even see where the attack is coming from. You understand? So those are the basics that need to be recalibrated, as well as increasing awareness of the public. But also, finally, which you make the point, I think it's very important, and there's a program that we're trying to work on with Professor Alex Awiti at the Aga Khan University, you can see that our public communications protocol is always hesitant, is always behind schedule. So the State Department has issued this confidently, quickly, expeditiously, forthrightly. But the KDF are really not sure, should they say something? Should they acknowledge there was an attack? So there's a balance, between how you communicate for credibility. Do you deny? Is it the truth? How deep should you? So there's that whole unexplored area, but there are things that were put in place that can very much suitably, address that as far as government communications goes. Because many times also, if you want a Kenyan to not believe something, then have government say it. The impulse is, government is saying, so you ni uongo. So those are the kind of huge challenges that we as communications professionals, etc., are trying to change. And while we're at that, allow me to just say this, Linda, the last thing. I've looked at international media coverage, and I don't know that the classification or the description of Qasem Soleimani as an assassination, I don't know if that's the right way to go. Martin Luther King was assassinated. Pio Gama Pinto was assassinated. Tom Mboya was assassinated. Qasem Soleimani did some decent things, for example, fighting ISIS. But you see, the intelligence shows that he was the one supplying armor-piercing detonators and bombs and whatnot that were used to fight the U.S. forces during the... You see, after the Iraq War of 2003, the war now began in what they called... there was an insurrection. That is now really when the war began, because they didn't face the Americans head-on. They then did an insurgency, okay? And this is the guy who was supplying that kind of thing. And so to give an order to take him out, an order given by a president, I'm not the one to say, Linda, that it's justified, but an order given by a president on the leader of a militia does not amount to an assassination.
Okay.
Assassination is of a credible person, a cabinet secretary, a head of state, etc. And so I've noted with concern, this discussion and classification of this, because also we don't want to confer martyrdom status to him and therefore justify their actions, which is kind of what is going on now, specifically in Iran and across much of the Middle East as we speak. Yeah. So I have a bit of a concern around that. Yes.
All right.
Okay. And he was, of course, a former ally of the United States.
It's in fact, allow me to say, Michael, maybe it's like saying, would you say Saddam Hussein was assassinated? Sorry, not Saddam Hussein. Osama bin Laden. Would you say Osama bin Laden was assassinated? Osama bin Laden was taken out. Yes. He was eliminated because there's a lot of blood on his. There's a lot of allegations and credible intelligence showing that he had killed innocent civilians, that he was behind 9/11.
Yes.
Okay, so the same thing here with Qasem Soleimani is that a lot of, for example, the attack at the Cafe Milano in Washington, the attempt against Saudi Ambassador Adel Al-Jubeir in 2011 that was foiled. This was specifically linked through tracking, phone signals, messaging, communications, etc., to Soleimani.
This could have informed the change of tone of Trump, whom for the longest of time had been talking differently, on a different tone in regards to the issue of
Exactly. And so someone like that with blood on the hands, I don't know that it's a right thing to say.
On what house does it explain, if I may come to you, to just finish up on this before I come to the other two panelists, is why he never managed to take a cue from the likes of John Bolton, Michael Flynn, and the likes of Steve Bannon, who have been advising him consequently with regards to Iran taking the regime out, seeking regime change, and does it perhaps form eccentric sort of culture in Donald Trump, who might have done this individually ahead of impeachment process and an electioneering year populist ahead in November 2020?
You know, that's a good question, and I appreciate that question very much. Iran is a complex piece of the puzzle. Iran is many times is bigger than Iraq. I think is 90% Shia.
90%, almost 95%.
Yeah, only 95% Shia, whereas Iraq was led by the Sunni.
Yes.
Minority Sunni.
Majority Shia.
Majority Shia.
Yeah.
I hope I have that right.
Yes, yes. It was minority Sunni Saddam who led.
Yes.
Majority Shiites.
Majority Shiites, yeah. And so these Shiites also, they find their brotherhood, their Muslim brotherhood, in Iran. So Iran also has nuclear weapons. So this is not something that you want to rush into. But I'll say this, and I tweeted this out yesterday. Donald Trump, you know, Donald Trump is Donald Trump. Donald Trump is problematic, extremely problematic. He has run the country in a very chaotic manner. Ironically, the economy is doing very well. And so, because the economy is doing well, he still had a chance. But a lot of the focus now, especially during the impeachment proceedings that went on in the lower house in December, because that was the Christmas present they gave him, a lot of the discussions now were focusing back on American values. Is it okay for a president to lie, to be seen to be not family-oriented, you know, disrespectful of women, blah, blase, blase, blase. And so, I believe that prior to this hit against Qasem Soleimani, my own personal assessment, and I'm a political analyst of note, is President Trump did not have a chance in 2020. He didn't have a chance in 2020. And I like to explain this all the time, Ayub, in the context of, for example, you might remember that there was a fallout between Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders in the Democratic primaries
that was in 2016.
Did you know that that led to the sitting out of the election of 10 million voters? So if you look at the numbers, if you look at Barack Obama's numbers, Bernie Sanders' numbers, and Hillary Clinton's numbers, there was a sit out of more than 10 million voters in protest against Hillary, who herself was a very polarizing figure. Yet, Hillary still won more than 4 million votes of the popular vote. So that tells you that this time, Trump was really going to run into issues.
But wait a minute.
Now, with this attack on Iran, I can tell you that if Trump ever had a chance to be re-elected, this is it. Because the scourge of terrorism, the reality of security issues, and the paramount nature of that, and the need for even, I don't want to say trigger happy, but someone who will tell you, if you hit the United States, we will hit you back hard, and we will hit you very fast.
Disproportionately.
Disproportionately. If anyone could do that, it's Trump. And therefore, that gives him a pathway back to the presidency. I don't want to speculate on his motivations at this particular time, but it wouldn't be far out of reach to say that perhaps this also had a political undertone under it for his own self-survival.
What about the global implications to it? The fact that he knows very well that, of course, this would throw the global fraternity off balance. I mean, and he still went ahead to do that. What does it speak about? Technically, what will be left of the global fraternity in the event that, yes, Iran makes good its threat to proceed and revenge?
I think, first of all, before I come to your question, I would want to add what my brother here said. And I think one of the biggest solutions that comes comes by is governments have a very big role to play. When you look at the U.S. is a superpower. It communicates openly and without further ado. It does not mince its words. If you attack us, we are going to come to you harder than you think. So for me, if we cascade that down to our communication agency, like at the local level, I think governments must know that they have a very big role to play. And you see, that has a ripple effect. And when I come to what you're saying on the global perspective, US in itself wants to prove that it is indeed a superpower. And what come may, you will roll with what we are saying. I mean, security is an issue, and it subscribes to our own values, and we must actually act the best way we can. And you see, as Benji said, it has a political undertone, and it actually kind of massages the impeachment that is underway.
Okay.
So people will start feeling, you know, I mean, yes, the economy, number one, is growing. Number two, he is actually working alongside our national values as America. So for me, I think it will have a global impact in such a way that US being a superpower,
Okay.
I mean, it is giving, you know, direction to the other states. This is how we are going to deal with this issue and menace.
Okay, Mike, another political angle, just coupling it up, because there are two other key important figures that are equally enmeshed in this particular problem or scenario. The Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, who all have been facing political pressure. Bin Salman, the murder of Jamal Khashoggi, and the Israeli Prime Minister is unable to form government because of the hung parliament, and he never secured a majority. How does it boost them politically, equally as we have seen Trump wanting to play to the 2020 November card, and equally, does it present the global fraternity or community with a possibility of World War III?
You've asked many questions. I'll answer them. But let me start first by giving a very personal opinion about the death of Qasem Soleimani. In my opinion, it was an assassination because he was in active service of his country at the time. He was a major general, up to and including
And
his
more
death.
powerful than even the president, some say.
Yes, and after his death, posthumously, he became a lieutenant general. And whoever ordered for his assassination came on TV and claimed as such that he was taken out because of his impact in the politics of the region. Okay?
Yeah.
So, but that's my personal opinion. I don't have to go beyond that. Now let me answer yours. Benjamin Netanyahu is unable to form government. For all sorts of reasons, he was unable to command a majority in the last elections, and even Benny Gantz, his opponent, was unable to form a government.
Right.
And they are still struggling with that. They have a common enemy. America and Israel have a common enemy in Iran. So it's okay for Netanyahu to celebrate the removal of Qasem Soleimani. How that will help him in forming a government, that much I do not know, because he's not the one who took him out. So he cannot claim credit for it. He will. Now, as for bin Salman, he has been under a lot of pressure ever since the death of Khashoggi. And perhaps this is going to relieve that part of that pressure, because now the attention is going to be diverted to Iran, who is now in the eye of the storm, so to speak. So what happened first with the elimination of Suleiman is going to have a very big effect in the Middle East politics, because people like Salman have benefited from diversion of attention. Netanyahu may also be celebrating because at least one enemy is down, which may be important for them, as Israel must be very gleeful in this manner. America has its own issues. And I still go back to what I said earlier. There is the impeachment proceedings, which are, they finish in the lower house, and probably they're waiting for it in the upper house, and then the upcoming elections. And they will milk as much profit from it politically as they can get. All right? So that is my opinion about it. Okay. So whether they did it for any other reason, I think they are going to make it as politically profitable as possible in U.S. politics.
Okay, thank you, Mike. We now turn our attention to equally another important factor here, Benji, Mike, and Morocco, which is schools that are reopening in the country, and it equally comes with the pressure upon parents, pupils, and teachers across the country. Hard economic times, and the pockets are running dry. Parents are worried, and it comes at a time when the ministry is in the midst of rolling out the competence-based curriculum in the country in an attempt to the scaling up of education in the country. Coming to you in the next couple of minutes as we finish up on this, Benji, first. Is it a likely scenario that we are witnessing here, that the underperforming economy having an impact on Kenyans in this particular scenario, of course, guardians or parents who are taking their kids to schools this Monday as schools reopen across the country? And how do we turn around that? Because the pockets are dry. The president is asking Why is it that people don't have money and economically we seem to be on the abyss? What is our resurrection point?
Good question, Ayub. You know, if you notice in the last few weeks, on this show and elsewhere across media, it's like this is a recurrent theme. We keep coming back to this theme. And I saw something the other day from a Kenyan in South Africa asking, is Kenya going to be the next Greece? We obviously have a debt problem in this country. It's very unfortunate. It's extremely painful. If you look at it from the standpoint of, for example, SME analysis, which are the majority. Small traders who are really the engine of the economy. And if you look at that against the backdrop even of proposals to increase some taxation on them at 3%, I believe it was, because the government is extremely, I hate to use the word broke, but is kind of under pressure and running broke. The grace period for the SGR loan facility.
We have started paying 2 days ago.
I'm sure the guys who are signing just thought, oh, 5 years is a long time. 5 years in Bali. And now it's here. So we started paying beginning of this year, 2020. And I understand that it pushes the premiums up from 31 billion or 30 billion to 71 billion. Now, the SGR is a good thing. And one thing I like about the SGR, if you try to travel by SGR, you notice that it is almost always fully booked. So you see, it was a good thing. And I like to give the analogy of this cup. This is a good cup. This is a usable, functional cup that you can wash and use to have a cup of coffee. But if I tell you, Ayub, this is a good cup, it's a clean cup, it's a durable cup, but buy this cup at 10,000 shillings.
Makes no sense.
That's when you have the problem. So the overpricing, the kickbacking, the inflation and all of that, under Rotich, really was a disaster, a terrible disaster for this country. And so what we have to do, because I also like to talk about solutions, is the president is obviously under duress. Everybody, including in his own backyard of Gatundu, let alone Central, people are up in arms, from border to taxi drivers to farmers to, I mean, nothing is working. What we must do is he must change the team at Treasury on a very urgent basis so that you have experts now that come in very quickly and do some proposals and implementation of the same to turn things around, to spur the economy, because there's really no circulation in the market. I don't know whose idea it was to change the currency. I told you before, I think it was a mistake. And the way that, you know, the liquidity dried up, I don't see that there's been any unlocking of the same at a macro level. And so he needs very quickly, I don't know, for example, Ukuri Atani.
Preset, you know, it gets affected by how the economy is performing. And when we look at, you know, the majority of Kenyans come from the informal sector. We are straining this informal sector, yet they are supposed to educate their kids, but they don't have disposable income in their pocket to give their children quality education. So for me, I think it is important that generally we need to fix the economy for other sectors such as education to work. Because once you fix, you know, other sectors, people have disposable income, and improves the quality of education that they offer to their kids, becomes, you know, has a ripple effect on the society that we are looking. That's my take on it. Yeah.
May I?
Sure.
Thank you. Linda, the truth of the matter is that the education sector in this country is in a deep crisis. From two fronts. One, from natural calamities. Right now, our schools have been swept. If you come from Nyando constituency in Kisumu, all the schools are in Lake Victoria. Now, I don't know where those...
You stay at home.
Yeah. And
And there is a locust invasion in my home county.
In Wajir, there is a locust invasion, another natural calamity. I think our education system is in deep trouble. The next round, the next cycle, now there will be droughts. Our pupils will not be able to go to school because when there are droughts, then they are unable to feed, there will be no water to serve them and those things. But then we also have policy gaps. Apart from natural calamities, we also have policy gaps. In this country, we have the so-called 100% transition.
Which is yet
to be established, to be realized.
And yet, we do not have adequate materials, learning materials in our schools. We do not have adequate facilities in our schools. We have congestion in our dormitories, in our libraries, in our laboratories, in our classrooms. We have dilapidated infrastructure in our schools. Some of our schools are pathetic. If they are brought in the media, you will even be ashamed to identify with that village. That is where you come from, because the school itself will look like a scene from a horror movie. And that is the reality of the education system, the public education system in Kenya. And to spice it all, there are always constant quarrels within teachers' unions and the government. So
the commission.
And of course, the government
relates
with the teachers through the commission.
Yes, yeah.
So that has not helped matters. It has not helped matters at all. Finally, the government says that fees are standardized.
Yes.
But the goods that the schools use to maintain the students, like the foodstuffs, like all those things, their prices are not standardized. Already, it is mind-boggling. How do we strike the balance so that the schools are able to breathe, and the parents are also able to breathe, and the government is just quiet? For a fact, I think that the education policy in this country needs to be looked at properly and thoroughly, because education is not a small matter, and it should not be left to... I see Magoha is trying his best. He's always in the media. Yesterday he was somewhere in Chemelil in Moroni, and he was ordering the Kibo Sugar Factory to construct a school because of the pollution they are emitting. You know, he's trying what he's doing, but we need comprehensive policies to manage the education system in this country.
While we might say we'll fix the economy, if we do not fix the policies, then it's as good as...
It's as good as that, because education, you know, basically, why does government provide education? It is not supposed to be a profit-making venture.
Okay.
Because government provides education to empower its own citizens, to empower them and to save them from illiteracy, from ignorance, and all the maladies that accompany such things. So government should really think through education policy so that people are properly empowered. People should not just be going through conveyor belts.
Okay.
Though sometimes it's in government's interest to have ignorant citizens, so that, they don't hold you to account.
Well, true to that, that's what they say. But then again, on that very note, we hit
Crooked governments.
I agree.
We'll be right back in trying to understand why some of these governments actually get themselves and how they get themselves into power, as we take a look at an overview of technically what happened. Of course, some of the papers regards to the Cambridge Analytica involvement on, of course, 2013-2017 elections right here in the country. After this break. Yes, welcome back to the broadcast. And on that very note, I don't know whether the gentlemen are done discussing issues to do with matters education and how best we can solve the economy. It's pretty much sad that we're still talking about this. But then again, of course, in a country that is evolving, we are certainly bound to discuss as such. And as we proceed, we all, of course, put our hands towards ensuring that we make the best of the economy and the best of the education sector. So on that very note, I think it's important and fair that we exit the stage in regards to that and we cross over to matters polls and how we have considered it to be poisonous ourselves, Ayub and I, you know, looking at the events of the day and as they unfold, I would want to assume that we all looked into, you know, the article that was there yesterday in regards to the involvement of Cambridge Analytica on matters of politics right here in the country. And another article today that, of course, there's that dictate or declaration by ODM that they refused to work with Cambridge Analytica. And of course, that is in 2017, also in 2013, when they were almost certain that they're going to sort of clinch the seat, only to be surprised by President Uhuru Kenyatta and his deputy, that is Dr. William Ruto, when when they cleaned the seat amid the tough times in ICC. So I think we just need to go back into the drawing board and understand at what point we are able to attain electoral justice. You know, the reducible minimums, the likes of ODM equally arguing that they're going to focus so much so in regards to ensuring that we get, you know, that electoral justice aspect of it. But the question today is, are they still focused on that amid the handshake? Is the handshake set to address electoral justice? Is BBI set to address electoral justice? These are some of the things that we'd look to hear what, of course, the panelists have to say in regards to the same. And I think we'll go cross or straight to it on matters politics in the country. There you go.
For me, one of the best moments of clarity on these issues, for me, happened in 2017, where there was a lot of contestation after the Supreme Court about the outcome of the election. Yes. And President Uhuru, who was very much under siege, came out and explained something. And you see, some of us are communications people. We look at the text, we look at the context, we look at the body language. And he explained how, even if the court removed this,
I'm still the president.
Yes. No, even if they removed and he stepped away from State House. If you look at the number of seats Jubilee had garnered, even if he gave Raila as a friend, Roho Safi, like, okay, the court has removed me, it goes to Raila Odinga. And then President Uhuru said, Raila would be sworn in today, and it'd be impeached tomorrow. And when the president finished that statement, he said, I remember that very clearly. If you go and look at it. And so, from the strategy standpoint, the way these Brits, and I haven't read, I looked at the highlights, but I didn't read them in detail. The kind of wit employed, the kind of games, right from the beginning up to the end, it was really, really, really sad. And you know, the craziest part is that right from the beginning, and this was brilliant, but it came back to haunt them later. Jubilee candidates had collected enough intelligence and background and had therefore cast their opponents as old, analog, slow, disorganized. You just have to go and look at all the campaign material that was out there and cast themselves as young, fresh, digital, fast. And so, in that context, they not only won the contest, but the other side lost the respect of the younger boys. Because you know, you can actually be in a context. And I'll give you a good example. 1997, Kibaki versus Moi. Moi never lost the respect of Kibaki. Kibaki cannot lose respect. Moi knew the allegation was he had rigged. He knew his days were numbered. He could see it clearly. And by the way, the narrative at the time was if the opposition united, Moi was out. So it was, the writing was on the wall. And as soon as opposition united, 5 years later, Moi was out. And with his candidate as well. So the lessons here is, you can see this stag that haunts ODM as disorganized. So even now, apparently, they try to talk to Cambridge Analytica. So today they've said it's an evil firm. At the time, they didn't really know how. Actually, Cambridge Analytica tried to talk to them. You see, at the time, they didn't really know who Cambridge Analytica were. Subsequently, once they were a victim of Cambridge Analytica, then now they have to change the story. But the worst part, of course, is that the firm that they had brought in were just monitored, rounded up one evening, rushed to Jomo Kenyatta Airport, and kicked out of the country decisively. That sometimes is how to win a war.
Okay. Let's come to Morocco.
I think Uhuru is American trained.
Okay.
I think Uhuru is American trained.
Equally, what's more fascinating is that if we can have the Sunday edition on page 1, that story, that was equally captured by the Daily Nation in the Sunday edition yesterday. And this is how it was looking like. And the headline equally read like this: how Jubilee ripped poll wins from ties with Cambridge Analytica. This was a campaign rally by the president and the deputy in Meru County in the build-up to the 2017 elections. And it was highlighted on the front page of the Daily Nation. Morocco, if I may come to you. The company did say in series of leaked emails that it did brand the National Alliance of the president who walked out from Kanu in 2012, led to victory in 2013, and ever since then managed the campaigns of the president, came for a strategy in 2016, and then in the build-up to 2017. What's more even eye-catching is the fact that they created a video of an apocalyptic scene of what Kenya might look like under Raila Odinga presidency. At the time ODM approached, they said, no, we are sure of winning, so come back to us for re-election in 2017. So did they underestimate that? And how does it perhaps again here, more importantly, address the issue of electoral justice? And how porous is the institution that manages the elections in this country, to the extent that this firm managed to collect the scientific data on Kenyans, mismanaged that data, and created something out of it that led Jubilee to power in 2013 and 17?
Well, I think the Cambridge Analytica issue is, I think it happens in movies. When you look at it, in as much as it's a sad state of affairs for this country, at the back of my mind, I think a lot of wit was used. Because when you look back you look back and try to analyze how the campaign, the Jubilee campaign, were carried out, you cannot miss to see the bravado, you cannot miss to see, you know, the intellect, you cannot miss to see the organization, you cannot miss to see the swag, you know. They came out very clearly. Okay. And you see the majority of the Kenyan electorate are youthful. So they touched their hearts. So for me, when I look at the positive aspect of it, those guys are good.
The Cambridge?
Yes.
It is tactical. Jubilee says that, you know what, they were involved, yes, but not in any legalities. So yes. A clear indication that, yes, that they are as good as, you know, people
and they say they have nothing to apologize for. That's the Jubilee Party.
You see, elections, when you're doing something, an elections needs, you have to have a strategy. And for me, they looked for the best team to fix their strategy. And Cambridge Analytica came out so well. The only unfortunate part is we lost our identity as a country. Why am I saying so? It is quite a sad state of affair because, you know, you wonder how a foreign company can come into our country and, you know, we cannot be able to see, you know, their intention, because everything else was based on perception. You know, what they were doing, they were brainwashing Kenyans. They destroyed our democracy. They actually tainted the opponents as corrupt, as he said, as old, you know, and these other new ones as confused, you know, as violent. And you see, the same narrative actually keeps on playing, like the recent Kibra election. You know, when the other side, the Jubilee side of it was trying to taint that wale watu wa mawe and all that kurusha mawe, you know, that, you know, it's quite sad, really, because we lost our identity. I wish we were a mature electorate in such a way that we vote our leaders based on real ideologies. Because the fact that we can be manipulated, really, we need to question ourselves. What is our worth? For me, this, I would say, is the worst case of neocolonialism. Because these are people who come into our country in less than 2 years. They've already gotten data. Okay. I mean, after that, they use the same data to manipulate us, and really, the results come out as expected. Quite sad.
Can I advance it before Michael?
Yes. You know, let Michael first of all express his sentiments. Okay. We'll come to you.
Thank you.
Watch it to share mkate.
It's okay. Ayub, this Cambridge Analytica question, for me, raises 4 issues. If you read the story the way it broke out over the weekend and up to date, the first observation, the first lesson you learn from it is a big lesson to the political class. however popular you are in politics, always listen to the experts.
Yeah.
That is how ODM lost it. They were, according to them, they were so popular, which actually they were.
Overconfident.
But they made a mistake of looking down upon experts. There are those who are trained to do these things. And you can see they have said they used to manage the political rallies of Jubilee and
Right, speeches, branding,
media
organizing.
messaging and polling services, all those things. That is the first lesson. However popular you are, there is a game that you leave to the experts. Talk to Kinabenji Ndolo to manage that part. Don't think since you are charismatic enough to draw millions to your rally, then you are good in everything else. The second lesson is, however wealthy you are in politics, listen to the experts and let them do it for you. Jubilee had that lesson with them. They had a lot of money, and you can see from the stories, even Cambridge Analytica was surprised that Jubilee could spend that much. And then they gave Jubilee their best. And those who ignored them are still paying the price to date. These are simple lessons you learn from this thing. The third lesson that you learn from this Cambridge Analytica story is there are very many faceless characters in a general election in a country like this one.
Okay.
The speed
And you never come to meet them. It's only now that Cambridge Analytica has come out. We don't know how many more are still hiding in the woodworks. And what they were doing, maybe Kenya will just erupt into flames. There are so many, and those faceless characters can easily compromise the election because they have their own interests, and nobody knows their interests. Now, the fourth lesson that you learn from this Cambridge Analytica thing is, unless candidates and political parties are compelled to disclose the sources of their finances. You know, in Kenya today, we have the Political Parties Finance Act,
Yes.
which was passed, but it was suspended by Parliament because it was going to affect them directly.
Yes.
So they pushed it
Until
to 2017. Then when 2017 was approaching, then they pushed it to 2022. We hope and pray they will implement it, because it does not stop Linda from contributing to Ayub's campaign kitty. But Ayub should simply disclose that I received $1 million shillings from Linda, and this is how I used it. Now, in this country, the lesson we learned from this Cambridge Analytica is, where was Jubilee getting all this money that they were paying these fellows?
Okay.
Because there is no law in place to compel any political party to disclose the source of its money and how it spends it. And that really allows very many shady characters to come into your politics with the bags of money, and these shady characters will compromise the entire system. So that's my take. Those are the 4 lessons that I reached there.
So while it poses itself like strategy, equally it equates to injustice, electoral injustice for that matter.
Yeah, it can have, of course, anything that subverts democracy will be seen as electoral injustice. But the debate around democracy has always been, you know, and I was talking to one of the top political leaders last week and giving him an example. How when President Bush, after the Iraq War and what have you, with Condoleezza Rice, decided to export democracy to the Middle East. And so they funded different organizations and called for elections and what have you.
And it failed.
In the West Bank.
Operationalized.
Do you know who got elected? Hamas, a terrorist organization.
Yes.
If you put democracy, for example, you say we'll put democracy in Kandara in 2007, the time of Michuki, okay? Then you say free ballot, free, and then Mungiki, the Mungiki head, is elected, the MCA.
That's democracy.
His deputy is Mungiki, and they all know each other, and they behead people. So sometimes
You are right. It's called the law of unintended consequences.
Actually, it was exactly unintended consequences.
And democracy gave birth to Donald Trump.
And you can just imagine, exactly. And you can just
Mike Sonko in Nairobi.
and you can just imagine the shock on President George W. Bush, where Hamas, a terrorist organization that he was battling against, was now at the table as a product of democracy. To even sit with him, for example, at the UN, even at the level of Security Council, even as a semi-permanent member
Yes.
or temporary member,
Yeah.
to have discussions across the table. Now you sit across, was it called Wanugo or whatever? Imagine Wanugo sitting at the table with Kibaki to discuss policy.
Yeah.
So these are some of the, you know, we must not romanticize, you know, everything in the name of democracy, equitability, equality. One of the things that I picked from Michael's contribution, I think it was the second point,
Yes.
on the importance of listening and what have you. As you know, I've been an analyst for a while, and I was doing some work at the time around a competitor, but not really a competitor, CAS TV. And the host, like Ayub, was telling me how Honorable Uhuru came with Ruto. They were scheduled for an interview. They were from the campaign. You know, campaigns are long, you're dusty,
Tedious.
you're tired, you're tedious. So it was scheduled for the evening. So they came in, they were almost a little late. And when they came, the host had asked them if they could come back and do the primetime show together. And so he said they just consulted for 10 seconds. They said, "Ndugu yangu bwana." So you know how these guys are.
Yes.
See, tukimbia hapa kwangu, we freshen up, then we come back. So they rushed to the president's personal residence, Dennis Street, which is not far. You know, I think you know where
Yes, yeah.
the station I'm talking about is. And then to the shock of the host, they came back. They came back, then they sat and they were interviewed. And the host was taken aback at how warm, reachable, relatable they were. This was not the case now with the other side. And one of the things I wanted to also underscore when Michael was speaking is, do you know the reason why Jubilee brought in these kinds of experts and what have you? It's because of the kind of challenge that they were under going into the election.
ICC.
They were indictees. They were accused of murder. They were accused. And they were up against incumbents. A sitting prime minister and a sitting vice president. Under the circumstances, my friend, where do you even start?
Put your best foot forward.
You have to put your best. I'm not justifying anything. I'm just explaining. Because now often I'll get tweets here, insults here. Oh, you're the guys who are rigging. You're the one doing strategy for Jubilee. I wasn't. But under the circumstance, then they took the situation with the seriousness it deserved and were determined to uproot the other side, which in fact they did.
I was keen enough to hear you mention something to do with China when he was talking about where Jubilee was getting the funding. I was keen enough to hear you mentioning that.
I really can't go into that.
Numerous times people have argued that China is never interested in the politics of African. That's probably the reason why they've been able to penetrate. Like they come to bring you or to give you, they meet you at the point of need.
No
This
conditions.
But they're doing
infrastructure is
business.
what
Yes,
you need.
no conditions
This
of
is
what they give.
Yes.
No, but they're doing business here. So it would be in their interest to secure the business that they're doing by ensuring that the regime
At the level of
doesn't change.
the regime, yeah?
and
All
the
right.
regime-
Okay, well,
and the
now that you
allegations
said
also
you
is
don't
that
want
they
to
bribe
delve
a
deep
lot.
into it, I don't
Which
know why you
equally-
want to mention China.
In which equal America at the time never wanted Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto because they said Johnny Carson, who was then under secretary for
Yes,
African
yes.
Affairs, the choices have consequences because Americans never wanted Uhuru Kenyatta and William Ruto.
And then amazingly that changed 100%.
Okay,
And now-
Morocco Bishagi.
Welcome to the world.
Okay, and now, of course, it's Donald Trump, it's business, come politician, it's business first. He never cared about the gross amount of Jamal Khashoggi. He said, Saudis are good people, we're doing business with them, they buy our machinery.
That was the
And-
worst part of 2018, was
Yes,
it?
2018, October
Yeah, I
2018.
remember it was 2018.
Yes.
And that issue must not be allowed to go away, you know, to chop up a human being like that in a consulate. So I think just for Linda's benefit and the rest. So Saudi Arabia says that they've found
Five
some
people
guys
guilty.
including Dr. Kabej, what's his name?
Did they give the names?
I think
They gave some of the names, but you know, Saudi Arabia is such a rogue state that my message to the international community is that Saudi Arabia cannot continue to be allowed to behave like a wild animal simply because it has oil. It must be brought under book by whatever means necessary.
Okay, and Morocco, if I may come to you, when we have the Cambridge, Analytica here, it perhaps sits at the pivotal point of the political spectrum in the country. But then again, is it perhaps one that assaults or dots the democracy in the country and one that might derail the path to full operational democracy in the country? And is it a challenge for the policymakers to now turn attention on the lawmaking process, come up with perhaps policies and laws that might safeguard the Kenyan democracy? Because this has been the point in which America equally complained about the Russian meddling and how companies were used in the same capacity as Cambridge Analytica, which campaigned for Trump at the time, had infiltrated the electoral system in the United States of America. So are we learning the lessons going forward to 2022?
Thank you, Ayub. I think before you address a problem, you must understand the problem in itself. And it would be rightfully so from a moral perspective to say that some ethical values were compromised as far as electioneering is concerned. Mm-hmm. And once we understand that the ethical factor of it was compromised, then can we move forward in the right direction? I am glad that part of the reports, some of the reports, such as the BBI, and for me what really touched me about the BBI report is the aspect of national ethos, yes. The social and cultural values that we need as a country. I think that is what will necessitate, us coming out from this whole mess where our democracy has been poked. Once, as a country, as a people, we get to subscribe to certain national ethos, social and cultural values, I think this will steer us in the right direction. Because countries, it has come to be understood that countries that have thriving economies, subscribe to serious national values. A country like China, immediately a child, starts to understand themselves. The first thing is they are taught aspects of hard work. They are taught, values. And these are issues that will actually make you, uphold integrity wherever you are and as you grow. For me, that would be, the turning point for this country. Yeah.
Yes, Mike.
All right, coming of course to the factor that you bring on board, the role of the electorate and the social of contracts and cultures that we should have as a country. Like we rightfully put it, China has been able to establish that pretty well if you go into their history. Coming into the African continent, coming into different countries, we've had the likes in Tanzania, which they're trying so much so to maintain the Ujamaa aspect and the social contracts that they have within themselves. When you're looking at our very own country, do you suppose then that the troubles of life, in what was captured in one of the cartoon editions, it's today's cartoon edition, yes. In what are issues that we were supposed to address at the level of independence, 1963, are the very same issues that we're battling with, probably sort of explains the reasons as to why our credibility can easily be manipulated by the so-called experts that we are actually talking about, so that they can come to on ground and even decide that, okay, these are supporters of Jubilee, let's get them to drink, a fortnight, or maybe not really a fortnight, like on the eves of the election, or maybe at night to the election, and you get them all drunk to a point whereby they would not even be able to wake up the next day to go and vote. So, I mean, how then do we get to that point of addressing the issues such that even as we talk of an electorate that is going to be well motivated, in terms of ensuring that they maintain their credibility, I mean, we address this so that they would not be compromised at that point? Yeah,
so if you look at the screen, it says Kenya resolutions, 1963. Producer, if they can give us that on the screen.
Yeah.
Yes, that we have that up on the screen, so it's going to be showing up. Here we go.
So Jomo Kenyatta used to talk about this all the time, and I've heard Honorable Raila talk about this on the campaign trail. Wakati wa uhuru wetu, Rais Jomo alisema tunataka kutoa umaskini, ujinga, ugonjwa, and what is that? Is that corruption?
Get rid of corruption.
Is that corruption at the end?
Get rid of corruption.
Now, you can see, for example, that we have really not made progress on those fronts. So that is a serious indictment on the state, okay? Especially if you look at it, Ayub, in the comparative context of, for example, a country like UAE, Dubai.
Yes.
Just go look at what Dubai was in 1990, 30 years ago, and what Dubai is today. You can argue there's all the money from the Arab Peninsula and oil and what have you. But my point is
They
that
make
there's
good
no
use of it.
excuse,
Yeah.
there's no excuse for a country to struggle with poverty in the midst of plenty of resources. And the simple answer why this has been the case is a lack of leadership. And so to Linda's question, how do you fix this? By tweaking and remaking the politics. The politics cannot be anymore about foolishness, okay? Because this is the electorate now. It cannot be anymore about mobilizing tribes and clans,
Okay.
okay? And about such things as handouts, bribes, and buying alcohol, and food even. So I'm told in places in Western, you know, when someone is a candidate, then they invite the youth, you come, you leave your ID, you come into the homestead, and you feed for the next 2 days. So these are a way to disenfranchise, because now without ID you cannot vote. So once Michael is strong, then I attack his area by slaughtering people and inviting people to eat. So can you imagine that happening, for example, in a place like the States, where you tell people, come and eat at Ayub's place, we'll serve hamburgers, and then you're not going to vote. Nobody will come and eat a single hamburger. So we have to be serious about, you know, the issues now in the 21st century, in the 2020 decade. I mean, countries are surging forward, and you still have, as I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday, and I don't like to disclose, you know, so many personal things, but he has a relative who was a candidate, you know, in Busia.
Okay.
And so he came up with the speech and the policy, etc. Then they looked at it, and this is very telling, and said, you know, the people don't want to understand the GDP uptake for the counties, etc., disbursement from national treasury. The people don't want to hear that. So they made another speech that talks about the different clans and, you know, what excites our people. You know, sexual connotations and references. Flani flani, akikalikula flani flani kama mahindi. That's what the people want to hear, and they actually got elected. This was a very interesting conversation just this past week, talking about the pragmatism in our political context. So he was like, of these two speeches, they decided as a strategy team to not read this speech, to read this one, and this one actually worked. That tells you a lot about where this country is.
Okay, the final words to Morocco and Mike.
I think I've been quoted here saying that we need to understand ourselves as a people, as a country, as an electorate.
Okay.
We have a bigger role than we can ever imagine. The unfortunate part is that we have left this job for our political, for the political elite. And the other unfortunate part is that they know the current state of affairs, the political class, so to speak. So once we do a self-analysis, a retrospection of sort, and we understand that we have the power to, to dictate the direction that this country will, then I think we have a long way to go. But you see, it also boils down to what the political, class has in store for us. We need to know that we have the power to hold them accountable, and with that power, we can be able to steer this country to the right direction.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ayub.
Yes, Mike.
That cartoon, it has been removed from that screen, but it's still there.
Our director can still put that up on air.
Eradicate poverty, disease, illiteracy. And then there's a hand that is trying to wipe out the word corruption.
Yes.
Who is this that does not want us to discuss corruption?
Good point.
Interesting.
Why is the word corruption not written completely?
And
there's a hand there with a brush trying to wipe it out from the screen.
EACC.
Particularly in 2020.
Sonko.
When it is actually an existential threat to us now, because in 1963 actually there were three: illiteracy, poverty, and disease. But 2020 we have added two more: corruption and insecurity, which is pervasive.
That means we're moving backwards.
Yes,
Certainly.
we are adding more of
10
those
steps ahead,
challenges.
20 backwards.
Now, finally, I had ODM refer to
as
Cambridge
evil firm.
Analytica as evil firm. But I would want them to tell us, when did they realize
So they're evil.
that they are evil? And at what point? And what led them into concluding that they were evil? Was it after they delivered to their enemy?
Exactly.
Or before?
But
That is my question.
And
as I
also,
end.
what is holy about how they do domination?
Okay. Thank you, gentlemen. Because they were
Oh, it's
approached, they
equally
said,
evil.
they were approached, they said, we are sure, confident of the election. Come for us in 2017 when we are going to be seeking re-election. And it was a junior officer who linked the president and the company together. That is how the relationship soared from there. Thank you so much. Benji Ndolo, senior political commentator at the Center Morocco. Bishage, analyst, political commentator. Thank you. And Mike Oleo, on my immediate right, is public policy commentator and analyst in the country. I do thank you for coming on board. That's where we come to an end here on the program.
And thanks for the camel tea.
Thank you.
It was very delicious.
And by the way, I'm still receiving birthday gifts.
Oh.
Yes.
So,
All ignored that and
we
that.
can-
Belated birthday.
Happy birthday, my brother.
And
Happy
Linda,
birthday. Yes.
thank you.
can we welcome him back on set? We
I
missed
know,
him last
right?
week.
It's been a minute.
This is my first day in 2020 at work.
He went for Christmas.
Much appreciated. And I do thank you, gentlemen,
okay.
and
Thank
a
you,
lady. Thank you on her behalf. She's Linda Lela. I am Ayub Abdikadir Abdi. Winnie will be here with my doctor in about an hour's time. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned. Good morning.
Tomorrow.
Thank you.